Hey, this is Meridith Elliott Powell, and welcome to another episode of Thrive, turning uncertainty to competitive advantage. This is a show where we cover the strategies, the topics, everything that you need to know to shift how you think about uncertainty, and we'll turn all of this uncertainty into your competitive advantage. I am really excited about today's guest. I consider him a really good friend, one of the smartest guys I know, Bill Bachrach. Hey, Bill, welcome to the show.
Yeah, do you know two Bill Bachrachs? One of them is like one of the smartest guys you know.
Well, whoops, hold on. It said it. I don't think we went live. Hold on. Oh, yeah, we did.
Mhm.
We're trying it again. I've got a little technical difficulty. All right. That are probably going to be the only two compliments I throw your way. So I would take them. So Bill, for those in our audience who don't know a lot about you, kind of give us the Bill Bachrach story.
Yeah, I'll keep this brief. I know people are more interested in ideas than hearing about me, but since most people probably don't know me because I work exclusively in the financial services industry, I think one of the most important things that I'm actually proud of at this point in my life is I don't come from money. There was no wealthy family for me. I grew up on Air Force bases in enlisted man's housing, but I always wanted to be successful and at least relatively wealthy. And then unfortunately for me, by the time I was in my mid 20s, I had created a substantial negative net worth. I was so far upside down that broke was my goal. I mean, my friends would say things like, "Damn, I'm broke." And I'd say, "That's fantastic. How'd you do it? If I could just get back to zero, maybe someday I could have a positive net worth." And that's one of the reasons why I went into the financial services industry. I wanted to learn about money. I wanted to meet wealthy people, some of whom would become my clients and others I could learn from. So maybe someday I could be wealthy myself. And immediately I was obsessed with figuring out how to meet and steal wealthy people from their longtime financial advisors and have them do business with me instead. And the result was I created a methodology, a scripted, repeatable process called values-based financial planning. And it was working for me. And some of my friends in the business said, "Hey, would you teach me what you're doing?" And then it worked for them as well. So at the ripe old age of 29, I started a
Wow.
training company that evolved into a global speaking career, which evolved into workshops and coaching and mastermind programs. And now the core of our business is a virtual learning platform with everything that financial advisors need to know about client acquisition, client service, leadership, and time management, all for a single annual subscription fee. It's kind of like Netflix for financial advisors success training. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, so what I love about that story is literally, you didn't have a background in this, you didn't have training in this. You basically just had a desire and a confidence to achieve that. Would that be fair to say?
Well, not only did I have a background, I dropped out of college. I dropped out of college to move to San Diego to surf. I mean, San Diego's a beautiful city, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And when I was in college, I didn't study finance, I didn't study economics, I didn't study accounting or anything or financial planning. And so I'm a big believer in the fundamentals. And I think the fundamental Jim Rohn, who's sort of the godfather of professional development, he said, when you have enough reasons why, you can endure almost any how. And candidly, my reasons why, I hated being poor. I mean, I just didn't like being poor. And I remember, I live in La Jolla, California now, and I'm sitting in my home office and I'm not trying to make a flex out of this, but just to make a point, I've got this beautiful ocean view, and not too far is a little beach town called Mission Beach. And it is Ocean Beach and Mission Beach are probably the cheapest beach towns to live. It's where sort of you live if you can't afford to live anywhere nicer and you want to be close to the beach. I remember sitting in the surf maybe a mile from here, looking up at these big houses in La Jolla thinking, who lives there and how did they get there? And I remember looking around at 9:30 in the morning in the surf going, none of them are out here surfing.
Right.
Whatever they did to get there, it's not sitting out here. It's not like, I surf, but it's not like I was going pro. I had no
Right.
sponsor logos on my surfboard.
Not that
And,
much talent.
not at all. And in fact, I think talent in many ways is overrated. So it was really that I had this desire and I started trying to figure it out. And I discovered professional development, Dennis Waitley and Jim Rohn and people like that. And I started listening, and they're just these fundamentals. And I thought, so if I apply those fundamentals to whatever I do, that's really the key to success.
All right. And right there is the big reason that I wanted to talk to you today, because I have a guess that a lot of people listening to us don't like being poor, don't like not hitting goal, don't like not achieving what their dream is. I think that's probably pretty much a universal. So, but your story is really unique in the sense of there you sit in a surfboard, living in the least expensive place that you can live, close to the beach, and you have this vision, you have this dream, you start doing the fundamentals. What are those fundamentals, and what are the success principles? Because I don't know anybody else who lives them. So you're so aligned to them, really believe in them. And it's one reason you do what you do, because you're like, hey, this worked for me.
Yeah, and I've noticed it seems to work in any business. So while I am specific to financial services, these fundamentals worked for me as a financial advisor. They work in the business of being a speaker, author, trainer, coach, consultant. I know that they work in other businesses, real estate, mortgages, really anything. And the first fundamental that always comes to mind is you focus on what you can control. So there's what matters, and there's what you can control. And the intersection of those things, sort of the little overlap in the Venn diagram, is where you invest your time for your best results. And I've just noticed that most people get distracted by things that don't matter. And you tend to notice that the unsuccessful or less successful people tend to be embroiled in conversation about things that don't matter. And when I was a financial advisor, people are stunned to discover that I don't follow the market. You can't control the market. You can't control the economy. You can't control the government. That was one of Jim Rohn's favorite sayings. He'd say, it's easier to get rich than it is to fix the government. And so, I entered the business world in the 80s, and the government was broken in the 80s. And everybody seemed so surprised, like the government's all screwed up. And you're kind of like, well, yeah. I mean, and is there still unrest in the Middle East? I mean, so these are things people who are less successful tend to be distracted or even obsessed with all these things they can't control. COVID was a good example of that, right? So you can't control COVID. And I hear people say things like, boy, everybody I know in business is struggling because of COVID. And I just sort of smile and say, well, then it's time for you to get some new friends. I mean, if everybody you know is struggling because of COVID, I mean, you're hanging out with the wrong people. And so that's another success fundamental, that adversity is a springboard to success. And so
let me ask you about that, though, because I want to ask, so what if I am one of those people who is focused on what I can't control? And it seems to be a human condition. I mean, we seem to, in some ways, I think it's fun. I mean, it'd be much more fun to sit around and complain about the government than actually work on something, right? But why are we wired that way, and how do we unwire ourselves?
Yeah, the why we're wired that way is sort of is kind of a mystery. I mean, if any of us really knew why are we wired that way, I mean, there are a lot of experts in neuroscience and behavior change, and I think they are beginning to figure out some of those things. You actually talked about it. You didn't exactly use these words, but what I heard is it's work avoidance.
Right.
And so when I was a rookie financial advisor, I worked for Merrill Lynch. I mean, Merrill Lynch is a big firm with a great training program. Certainly that was the reputation when I went to work there. And we had a 4-month training program, and there were 177 of us in this nationwide class of rookies coming into Merrill Lynch. And so we started on June 17th, and our first day of production was October 14th. And people were literally quitting before the end of the first day. So they made it through the training and they took the classes. And then the first day was, oh, I've got to call people. It's the old joke that the receiver of the telephone weighs like 1,000 pounds.
Right, because you can't pick it up.
And so I think part of it is, maybe your childhood, your upbringing. But to answer the more, I think, relevant question is, so what do you do about that?
Yeah.
Well, my guess is in about 30 minutes, you probably, even if you're relatively new in whatever you're doing for a career or your business, the 3 or 4 things that really matter. and you know whether or not you're doing them. And you know the things that are distracting. Like people, I don't watch the news. People go, how can you not watch the news? It's, well, the device has an off switch. And people say, well, what do you watch? I didn't watch when it first came out, Jerry Seinfeld, comedians in cars getting coffee, right? So I would much rather watch Jerry Seinfeld and Bill Maher have a cup of coffee than watch one of the talking heads. So turn it off. I mean, it's pretty,
Yeah.
turn it off. Now, I'm not oblivious to what's going on in the world. I might catch a few minutes, or my friends will say, did you hear about? And then I get like 2 minutes of what really matters. I think it's being clear what doesn't matter, turn it off. And instead, fill your time in your calendar with things that really produce results. And if you don't know what those things are, ask the best performer in your business, because they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, start there. Start by really. I love the fact that you really modeled and started to look to people that that are more successful than you are. That's something I've really done all my life, both personally and professionally. Look to people who are 10, 15 years older than I am, and thought, what are they doing to live that life? I want to kind of copy. I want to copy that. But what are some other success principles that that we should be living by?
Yeah, well, one of them is just be great. I mean, not good, but actually great, like top 1%, top 2%, 5% of the worst, at the
Mhm.
worst, rather, like the top half of A. And the question comes up, well, Bill, great at what? Well, why don't we start great as measured by the value for the client? I mean,
Yeah.
in every business, there's something that represents greatness. So in the financial services industry, for example, there are about 100 things that could be done for the clients to help them with their finances. And most financial advisors do 5 or 6 of them, and they tend to just focus on the investments. The standard of care is really low. And
Yeah.
ironically, what the mediocre do is they justify being mediocre by the fact that, well, this is what everybody else does, which is like exactly the reason why you don't want to be in that group. It's like
Right.
the C student sitting around going, well, C is right in the middle of the bell curve. And that's, Steve Martin has a great line, be so good they can't ignore you.
Yeah. Yeah, back when I was a banker, I'd flown to the Northeast to look at the bank of the future we were studying, and the guy there who was designing it studied banks all over the world, and he said the number one reason that most people don't change financial institutions is because they assume the experience will be just as bad. And he said, take that and understand that is how low the bar is on your competitor. If you can just inch above not being awful, you're going to win as much business. And that is stuck in my head for the
Right.
last 25 or 26 years, that you need to get above that.
That is so good. I just did a session for our members. We have a monthly members only Zoom meeting, kind of like this, only it's one lesson of the month and then Q&A. And my lesson of the month last month is that the government standard, the Securities and Exchange Commissions, FINRA, the regulatory bodies, that's the lowest standard. Like
Yeah.
below that, you go to jail. That's not the standard. That's the lowest standard. And
Yeah.
when you function, and that's what we do, we teach people to steal clients. We call it rescue from other financial advisors. And these are high net worth, successful people. Well, you got to be great to do that. And so in
Mhm.
any business, if you enter it, and you see it happen all the time, you see people enter commodity like businesses. Amazon started out as an online bookstore,
Right.
right? And they enter this commodity business. Zappos goes into the shoe business. I mean, just these commodity businesses. And by being great, like in the top 1, 2, 5% at the worst, that becomes the standard. And then the second one is something that's very related to what you do. And it's just work ethic. You
Yeah.
talk all the time about just make some noise,
Mhm.
have good follow up. I mean, can you imagine like following up well is like a secret to success,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
that's one of the things I really appreciated when I entered the financial services business, when I entered this business. I remember once I looked around saying, I can outwork all these people.
Yeah.
So it may take me a little while to be better than them. I'll figure that out. But right away, I can outwork them. And it's not just working more hours. It's actually working smart, right? It's working on the high payoff activities. It's not being busy. It's not being at work. It's actually figuring out these are the 3 to 5 things that really produce results. And that's the work ethic, doing those things more. So on the day that other advisors were quitting, that first day, because that they, I mean, literally they quit, I made like 250 cold calls.
Yeah.
And it just stunned me that people were quitting. I mean, like literally, I'm Pacific time, but like by 11 in the morning, I remember my buddy came in and said, so and so's already, like, walked in. He said, so and so's already quit. And I said, I looked at my watch. I go, it's 11 o'clock on the first day. I mean, so the work ethic just wasn't there from the very beginning. That realization, oh crap, this is going to be hard.
Yeah. And I think along with work ethic, I think something that's really underrated is consistency. I mean, I feel like I do things that I'm supposed to do every day. I focus on the things that I need to. And some days I do them really well. And some days I don't. I mean, but it's years ago, I heard Gabrielle Reese, the professional volleyball player, talking about working out and staying in shape. And they said, how do you do it? And she said, because I work out when I don't want to. And some days that workout isn't even very good, but I do it. I force myself through the process. And she said there's just a compounding effect. And I feel like it's that way in business too. It's that I practice these things every day. Some days it's really high quality. Some days it isn't, but at least I do it.
You do it every single day. There's that, and that's a success principle.
Yeah.
So I find it interesting that we have these conversations about these fundamentals, and maybe I'm just really clear that they're fundamentals, but you embody these things. I mean, you exude these things. You absolutely know what everyone is. The fundamental that I'm thinking of is consistency is more important than perfection.
Yeah.
And there are so many people who wait. Right? Perfectionism is a form of procrastination. It sounds kind of noble, right? Well, the reason I'm not doing that is I'm waiting until, you're waiting because you're avoiding the work, you wuss.
Yeah,
you're not
right.
waiting because your standards are so high. And I think it was Stephen King who said something to the effect of amateurs write when they get inspired. They wait for inspiration to write. Professionals write every single day.
Yeah.
And that consistency is really important.
Yeah, I think, it's funny because the more and more I interview people who never went to college, the more successful those people are. And I kind of liken it a little bit to what you're saying. In my family, I'm one of 4 children, and I was not considered the bright child. I was considered the hard worker. And so my parents would tell me, I have 2 brothers who are incredibly bright, and my parents would, really dote on how intelligent they were. And I was the one who'd say, well, Meridith, you work really hard, And I found that later in life, I'm so grateful I wasn't the bright child. My brothers, one of which particular really can't fail. He won't try because he doesn't want to fail. And I pretty much follow my head every single day, but I'm okay with it because that was never the expectation for me. The expectation was for me to work hard, not to necessarily succeed or to, be first across the plate.
Well, that's another success fundamental
Yeah.
that you just described, which is there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. So could you imagine if like a professional athlete, a tennis player, a basketball player, can you imagine if like a tennis player misses a shot and then they just say, look, I'm going to need 50 minutes, right? I'll be back tomorrow. I mean, you got to, they shake it off and they keep playing. They don't look at it as they might not be happy that they missed a shot. In a worst case scenario, they break a racket and mutter under their breath, and then they're back either to receive the tennis ball or to serve. There's no time for that. And so you're learning from everything. We train financial advisors to record all of their conversations with prospects and clients, and then review those recordings to improve their communication skills, which is another key fundamental. Success is you have to have a great value promise, a really good work ethic, and it's more important to be a great communicator. And I remember I studied communication and effectively, not sales communication so much, but asking good questions, listening with empathy. Our body of work is about building high trust client relationships. And I remember other financial advisors were getting designations that they could hang certificates on their wall. I was becoming a great communicator by taking communication courses, by having professionals listen to my recordings and say, "Oh, Bill, well, that's awful. You interrupted them. You didn't hear what they said." It's like they said blah, and I wrote down a completely different word in my notes. And then I repeat. It's like calling people by their wrong name. I mean, and you start out awful. But if you work at it, you become an effective communicator. And I'm sure communication skills are more important than designations in most businesses.
Yeah, in fact, years ago, when I worked in healthcare, we went to listen to this high-powered attorney talk to us about why physicians get sued. And the number one reason that physicians get sued is that their front desk person is rude. And the reason is because that sets the tone. So if your front desk, if your team is really, really good and kind and listen to people, the doctor cannot even be very personable, and the doctor wouldn't get sued. The other thing is that how good you are or not good you are is far less important. People assume if you communicate well, you're really good at what you do.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially as you're becoming good, because people say that, well, how do I get business now before I'm as good as I'm going to be?
Right.
Right. So, because the way you get good is by doing, and you have to have some people who are willing to do business with you before you are as great as you someday will be.
Yeah. I always felt though, anytime that I ever started working for a company, and especially when I worked in financial services, because that was probably the one industry I went into where I was totally in the dark. I came from another industry into it. I didn't even have a clue what language these people were speaking. But I felt like I was the best salesperson I ever was the first year I worked there. I immediately asked my boss if I could start making sales calls because I couldn't answer a single question the customer had. So all I could do was listen and take notes and say, "Thank you very much. This has been great. I'm going to get back to you with some ideas that I think could help you." And then I'd have to go back to somebody else and say, "Tell me what this means and how I can help these people." But I was so good because I had to stay present and I couldn't solve a problem. So I couldn't cut the customer off.
Again, that's you living a success principle. What I did when I was a rookie is I just simply said that people would ask me technical questions, and my response was, well, prescription before diagnosis is malpractice in our business, just like in the medical profession.
Nice.
And so the only purpose of today's meeting is for me to ask you a lot of questions, gather everything I can possibly learn about what's important to you, what your goals are, your current situation. Then I'm going to take that back, my notes, as well as the recording of our conversation, to our team of experts, and we're going to collaborate and come back to you with recommendations. And I knew nothing. I mean, literally, it was the team of experts. They knew everything. People say, "Well, Bill, how did you learn about financial planning and how to do these things?" I learned about it by bringing the client to the table and then having the experts. I learned as the experts were helping my clients. And then anytime anybody would look at me with a question, I would say, "Well, I think John is better equipped to answer the question about investment management. I really think that Susan is the more technical expert on insurance." And I mean, my team had 331 years of experience.
Right.
And I remember that number vividly. And I had like 4 months of that. And then I had 5 months of that. And I hear that all the time with people who are newer in their profession. I was a 26-year-old college dropout with no background around people with money and no experience in economics or finance. I mean, what I understood being in debt. That's what I knew all about.
And surfing.
But nobody wanted to. No, I was never a surf instructor.
Bill, it is hard to believe, but we are just about at the end of the show. I have 2 questions left for you. The first question is, I want you to think a moment, and what would be your best piece of advice for anybody struggling out there who is quote unquote stuck in today's marketplace, not really sure how to move forward in 2021. And then tell the audience how to follow you, how to get a hold of you, and how to find out more about you and what you do.
Yeah, I'll answer the second one first. I'm not sure there's any reason to follow me more about what I do.
So I don't care if you're in financial services or not. Bill probably doesn't want you to, but you should.
I don't tweet. My Instagram is private just for my friends and family. I mean, you could go to LinkedIn, you could go to billbachrach.com. If you're a financial advisor, youradvisorroadmap.com. We do a monthly free online training about client acquisition. You'll find that at youradvisorroadmap.com. But I think these principles are relevant for anyone. I think the number one thing I'd recommend is get into action. Right? Whatever you do, identify that one most significant thing you could do that will move you forward and just do it. Like Stephen King said, don't wait for inspiration. Or maybe Meridith has been inspiration today. Maybe I've had a little inspiration impact. Consider that your inspiration, but get into action. Immediately do something that will move you forward, and maybe just take one thing. If you would normally watch the news today, don't watch the news today and notice nothing changes tonight. Right. It will be exactly the same tomorrow as it was today. And you watching it doesn't change the outcome. So harness that time for something more productive.
That's fantastic advice. I could not agree. One of the reasons I named my business Motion First is because I believe that that's where progress and success come from. It comes from definitely from movement. So, Bill, thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks to all of you. We had great audience participation today, and we will see you, I think, Friday of this week at noon Eastern for another episode of Thrive, turning uncertainty to competitive advantage. We will see you then.